What would World Wrestling Entertainment be without its scandals? Well, probably a much more stable and scrupulous organisation, yes, but also a bit more boring, don't you think? Though Titan Sports Inc. appear to be Teflon when it comes to the courtroom, they have still been rocked by various scandals over the years, which have resulted in settlements, firings, and in some instances, almost brought Vince McMahon to his knees. Sometimes the real drama takes place far away from the ring. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 scandals that rocked WWE. Join us. Number 10, CM Punk and the Art of Burying. Who knew a simple podcast could cause so much controversy? CM Punk's November 2014 appearance on The Art of Wrestling opened a huge can of worms that resulted in counterclaims, lawsuits, and broken friendships. The straight-edge superstar's explosive interview dished the dirt on his time with WWE, with Punk pulling no punches when it came to his issues with the company and the people in it, 10 months after famously walking out. The most damaging accusation, as far as WWE were concerned, was Punk disclosing that WWE doctor Chris Amann allegedly misdiagnosed a lump on his back as a fatty deposit. When Punk himself got it checked out after leaving WWE, his doctor told him that he could have died after ignoring it for so long. The former WWE champion was very critical of WWE for continuing to have him perform while he was clearly unwell and suffering physically. A man subsequently sued Punk and Art of Wrestling host and Punk's former friend and old tag partner Colt Cabana, seeking at least $4 million in damages. The jury ultimately ruled in favor of the defendants. Number 9, Sable Sues. Speaking of lawsuits, Attitude Era bombshell Sable sued WWE for $110 million following her acrimonious exit in June of 1999. Originally coming to WWE in order to act as then-husband Mark Mero's valet, Sable soon outgrew the wild man and became a megastar in her own right. Before long, she was all over WWE programming due to the consistently high ratings that she drew, her popularity landing her the women's title and a very lucrative Playboy cover issue. While at the height of her powers, Sable, along with Mark Mero, quit and called their lawyers. Sable cited sexual harassment and an unsafe working environment as reasons for her leaving and then filing suit. She claimed that male WWE superstars would walk into the female locker room as if by accident, and that she was persistently asked by WWE management to participate in a lesbian storyline and expose her breasts, something that she repeatedly refused to do. Because of the wrestling boom at the time, the lawsuit received plenty of column inches. However, it was quickly settled out of court just 2 months later. Sable eventually returned in 2003 and became Vince McMahon's on-screen mistress. There's probably a message in there somewhere, but I'll be damned if I want to find out what that is. Number 8, Signature Pharmacy. The summer of 2007 was a torrid time for Vince McMahon and WWE, with the Benoit family tragedy shaking not just them, but the entire industry to its core. 2 months after the tragedy, things got a whole lot messier when Sports Illustrated penned an investigation into an online steroid distribution racket following a police bust. Many current and former WWE stars were named as receiving shipments of the illegal drugs from a company called Signature Pharmacy based out of Orlando, Florida. In all instances, these purchases continued to happen after WWE instituted their talent wellness program following the death of Eddie Guerrero. Benoit and Guerrero's names were listed alongside top WWE stars like Edge, Randy Orton, and Umaga. Many talents were suspended after the news broke, but WWE's critics used the scandal as another stick to beat them with. The Benoit family tragedy, coupled with the Signature Pharmacy scandal, eventually got WWE hauled up in front of a US congressional committee, though by that point things had calmed down considerably and it ended up going nowhere. Number 7, the death of Nancy Argentino. The name Nancy Argentino may not be familiar to many WWE fans. She wasn't a wrestler or a manager or a ring announcer or indeed any part of the show. She was the 23-year-old girlfriend of one of WWE's then top babyface stars, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Nancy Argentino died on May 10, 1983, when, just hours after wrestling at a television taping, Snuka called for an ambulance to come to his hotel room. Medical personnel found Nancy lying there injured and took her to hospital, where she passed away shortly after. An autopsy revealed many cuts and bruises on her body, and her death was ruled as being the result of traumatic brain injuries. The coroner suspected homicide, and after informing authorities of his findings, Snuka was investigated. He wasn't officially charged, though Argentino's family won a wrongful death civil suit against him. 32 years later, in September 2015, the WWE Hall of Famer was arrested and charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. He pleaded not guilty and was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial before passing away on January 15, 2017. Number 6, the Backstage Bully Boys. While no single incident can be pointed to as being especially damning, the long-time backstage bullying and hazing that WWE superstars have been allegedly forced to endure over the years is certainly shocking. As more and more fans discover these stories, they become something that those once unaware can use as ammunition against a company that now promotes initiatives like the Be a Star campaign. So, where to begin? Bullying, hazing, and ribbing has been commonplace in wrestling locker rooms dating back many decades and is hardly a strictly WWE phenomenon, but WWE has long been a corporate, publicly traded company, and so when such tales become public knowledge, it brings into question how it could happen in that environment. The likes of The Miz, Daniel Puder, Rene Dupree, Justin Roberts, Matt Striker, and Mauro Ranallo have all come forward in recent years with stories about how they were harassed, verbally assaulted, and had their property stolen or destroyed. Brian Mayo, who performed on SmackDown as network representative Palmer Cannon, quit on the first day of an April 2005 European tour and flew himself home after having his life made miserable by his tormentors. And believe me, there are others. Number 5, the Edge, Lita, and Matt Hardy love triangle. When Matt Hardy was forced to undergo major knee surgery in the summer of 2004, he was confident that his girlfriend Lita would be taken care of on the road, especially with his recently married good buddy Edge watching over her. Well, he was watching over her all right. In fact, you might say he was right on top of her. Sex. When Matt found out about the affair, he was understandably upset and spilled his heart to his fans via the internet. WWE were not amused by that tactic and actually fired him because of it, as he was preparing to make his in-ring comeback. This did not sit well with some sections of the audience, who responded by hijacking Edge and Lita's segments with chants of "You screwed Matt," forcing WWE to turn Lita heel, partner them together on screen, and alter planned storylines. Even though their relationship was over and both tried to put the scandal behind them, Edge and Lita were continuously attacked by fans, the wrestling media, and Matt himself. It all soon became another WWE storyline, and everyone made up and worked together without incident, but for a while there, things were tense and WWE had a big problem on their hands. Number 4, the Ring Boy scandal. In 1992, WWE ring announcer Mel Phillips and then director of wrestling operations and former NWA star Terry Garvin were accused of lewd and inappropriate behavior towards ring boys, who were typically underage males that helped put the ring up before shows. The most vocal and key accuser, Tom Cole, claimed that he was fired after he turned down Garvin's advances and the scandal became public. This included the story being covered by mainstream outlets such as Larry King, Phil Donahue, and Geraldo Rivera's shows. Barry Orton, Randy's uncle and a former WWE wrestler, also made accusations. Garvin and Phillips were both fired, as was influential backstage figure Pat Patterson, though he was later rehired after it was established that he had done nothing wrong and was just lumped into the mess due to his sexual orientation. Cole would be rehired and was even given a tryout as a ring announcer, as well as having his schooling paid for by the company. However, he was fired not too long after when it transpired that he wasn't attending classes, which was part of his agreement with WWE. He later unsuccessfully sued the company and then kept a low profile before sadly taking his own life in 2021 at the age of 50. Number 3, oh brother. The world's most recognizable wrestler is no stranger to controversy in either his professional or personal life, but the scandal that engulfed him and WWE in the summer of 2015 was different. That July, audio emerged from a 2006 sex tape of the Hulkster and his best friend Bubba the Love Sponge's wife, I can't believe I just said that sentence with my mouth, that contained Hogan repeatedly using derogatory racial slurs. The response was swift, with WWE terminating their contract with Hulk while also scrubbing him from their website, removing his merchandise for sale, cutting him from the forthcoming 2K video game, and temporarily removing him from their Hall of Fame. Hogan pleaded forgiveness in interviews, claiming that the language he used was the result of where he grew up, combined with the bad place his personal life was in when the recording was made. He was repentant, but it took several years before WWE welcomed him back into the fold, with his on-screen return taking place in Saudi Arabia as the host of Crown Jewel 2018. Since then, Hogan has been an intermittent presence on WWE TV, though some will never forgive him for his actions. Number 2, the plane ride from hell. What happens at 30,000 feet doesn't always stay at 30,000 feet, as the Raw crew of WWE superstars who flew back from a tour of Europe in May of 2002 found out firsthand. The infamous plane ride from hell was a private charter flight from London to Connecticut that featured such classics as Brock Lesnar and Curt Hennig wrestling in the aisle and destroying plane furniture while banging into the aircraft's walls, Michael Hayes getting punched out by Bradshaw and subsequently having his ponytail cut off by X-Pac, Goldust drunkenly serenading ex-wife Terry Runnels over the speaker system, Scott Hall passing out and looking so bad that people believed he was dead, and Ric Flair walking up and down the aisle in nothing but his sparkly robe and allegedly exposing himself to an air hostess. When the crew got back on US soil, Executive Vice President of Talent Relations Jim Ross dished out warnings to the perpetrators while also firing Hall and Hennig for their antics. WWE and Ric Flair were subsequently hit with lawsuits stemming from the flight, with one flight attendant alleging that the Nature Boy tried to force himself on her. The suit was ultimately settled out of court. The scandal was given renewed attention in 2021 when it was the subject of an episode of Vice's Dark Side of the Ring series. Number 1, the United States versus McMahon. WWE's ace lawyer Jerry McDevitt is constantly at work putting out fires and fighting lawsuits thrown the company's way, but his task seemed a lot tougher in the summer of 1994 when Vince McMahon was put on trial by the federal government, charged with, among other things, possession of anabolic steroids with intent to distribute. The whole thing came about after Dr. George Zahorian, who had worked as a ringside doctor for WWE in the 80s whenever they were in Pennsylvania, told authorities that he had provided McMahon and much of the WWE roster with the drugs while being held in prison for another steroid distribution-related incident. WWE didn't even enter a defense, as the prosecution called upon several wrestlers to give testimony, including the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan, who both professed McMahon's innocence. One man out to get Vince was Nailz, who stated under oath that he hated his former boss and had a vendetta against him. Whoops. Ultimately, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty on each count, though the trial and media attention resulted in increased scrutiny and forced WWE to implement a drug testing policy and punish those that used performance enhancers.